Today on the Playbook Podcast, Donald Trump wants to talk about the price of drugs. He wants to talk about rare earth minerals. But all anyone else wants to talk to him about is what happened in Tuesday's elections. It is day 37 of the government shutdown. No one's ever said that before. And are things more divided than ever? And the world's biggest climate change summit is taking place today in Brazil, but the US is not taking part. Hello, I'm Jack Blanchard.
And I'm Dasha Burns. It is Thursday, November 6th.
And this is the Playbook Podcast. How you doing, Dasha? Nice to see you.
Oh, it has been a week, my friend. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it.
It's only Thursday, pal. It's only Thursday.
Yeah.
Plenty more to get on with today. Donald Trump Donald Trump has a busy schedule today.
He does.
We've seen from the White House briefing that he has a quote-unquote announcement to make at 11 a.m. Dasha, you figured out what it is. Tell us.
Yeah, so there's been a deal in the works between the Trump administration and drug makers Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk to lower the price of those GLP-1 medications, Lilly Zepbound and Novo Nordisk's Wegovy. It could go down to as little as $149 per month. In return, what the drug makers would get is that Medicare would cover the cost of the drugs for some Medicare beneficiaries. No doubt that the president is going to tout this as a huge deal. He's been making a series of these announcements with various pharmaceutical companies to lower drug prices. You know, the whole Trump RX thing that we talked about a little while ago. We knew this was in the works, but it sounds like we are going to get that announcement at 11 a.m. today.
Right, and that will be widely welcomed, I'm sure. Then later this afternoon into this evening, Trump has a big meeting with leaders of some of the Central Asian countries and then a dinner. He wants to talk to them about one of his favorite topics, which is dealing on rare earth minerals, which, of course, America is sort of scrambling to catch up with China on. And these sorts of trade talks, Donald Trump believes, and probably rightly, can help with that. The problem is he's going to have the press into the White House to talk about these things this morning, then again tonight. And he's going to get a barrage of questions, not about drug prices, not about rare earth minerals, but about what happened to his party on Tuesday night, the only topic that people are talking about in DC this week. And watching Donald Trump yesterday, I'm not sure he's got a great answer yet as to why Republicans did so badly.
Look, he said to a room full of Republican senators and the media that he feels like it was the fact that he was not on the ballot, and he blamed the shutdown after, we've heard for weeks from Republicans that Democrats are bearing the brunt of the burden. Well, the president just came out and said, I don't think so. We talked yesterday morning about what I've been hearing from some Republican allies of the president. Well, I then got to sit down and have a chat with James Blair, who was Trump's political director for the campaign in the RNC in 2024. He is now, of course, White House Deputy Chief of Staff. And kind of the big takeaways from him of what happened and how it's going to inform their strategy going into the midterms is, number one, the ballot issue. They need to figure out how to translate what Trump was able to do in places like New Jersey to Republican candidates, which did not happen in this election. Number two, affordability. He hammered home that the Republican candidates in these races were not talking about affordability enough. He was very critical of Winsome Earl-Sears running ads about transgender issues when that was not the top issue for voters in Virginia. And he followed that up by saying that President Trump is going to lean even harder and more heavily into messaging on the cost of living and on affordability going forward, and especially ramping up in the midterm year.
I mean, he says lean even harder. The complaint from Republicans is that Donald Trump has hardly been doing this at all.
That's
Donald
right.
Trump talks an awful lot to the media, and we've given him, much respect for that, more than any other president. He doesn't talk an awful lot about this issue.
And when he does, he says that the economy is doing great, that prices are lower, and that it's the best economy that we've ever had. And, I talked about this a little bit on yesterday's show, but the Republicans that I'm talking to, some of the criticisms are coming from surprising places. These aren't like what Trump would call rhinos, like people that are typically are comfortable criticizing him. These are some of his staunchest allies telling me behind the scenes that they are very concerned about the optics also of him traveling the world, dealing with these foreign policy issues while people are really struggling back home, and talking about how great things are puts him at risk of what Biden's problem became, which was he was saying that the economy was great while people weren't feeling it.
I completely agree. And you can see it happening in real time, even after those election results on Tuesday night, even after all the chat about affordability yesterday. Listening to Donald Trump, he was on Fox News last night, right? And he identifies the problem. He says, our candidate, the Democrats talk about affordability all the time in these elections. Our candidates didn't talk about it enough. Correct. That is clearly a problem for him. But when he then goes on to talk about affordability in this same interview last night, he says, prices are down, energy's well down, the stock market's soaring, but you have to talk about it. Every survey shows you that is not how people are feeling. Every survey I've seen which asks what people's biggest concern is, it is the cost of living for them right now. So when they hear a president just telling them, no, it's fine, you're wrong, it's fine, that is a very, very difficult message to telegraph to people who are struggling with their everyday lives. And the risk of voter backlash is severe. And I have to say, Donald Trump has very good political antennae. He knows what buttons to press. He hammers messages relentlessly that work and get people out to vote for him. But on this, it does not feel like he's getting it right. And you can understand the concern of Republicans because yesterday he was just doubling down on this message. Often when politicians have a bad night at the polls, they'll say, we heard what the voters are saying. We're going to take that away. We're going to think about it. We're going to listen. We're going to change. That is not what Donald Trump is saying.
That's not something that Donald Trump says ever, though. That's the thing. And that's the challenge for the team around him is he's not going to concede that things aren't working well under his leadership. So they have to figure out another way to make sure that voters understand that he is working and trying to make things better for them economically. And James Blair feels very confident that they are putting together a great plan to do that, and something that they believe is going to translate to the midterm candidates that they support. I will say, in the 2024 race, there was a ton of skepticism about the strategy that he and Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita and the team were putting together. And in the end, it was successful. So, he's got tricks up his sleeve, and so does the president, and so do their team. But what I am really interested in seeing how they operationalize the lessons learned from this, because there are lessons learned, and they hear it, and the president is talking to people. The public facing message and the private one might be a little bit different, but we'll see. We'll see where this lands them in the coming weeks and months.
You're completely right. They've never done well without Trump on the ballot, and he's not going to be on the ballot next year, and he's not going to be on the ballot in 2020. And
he's not going to be on the ballot ever
again. And then they need to figure this problem out. This is now an existential problem for the Republican Party. How do you win without him? Almost as if to prove the point, Dasha, you've got some new polling from a swing state that illustrates this very, very nicely this morning.
We've got some polling out of Arizona that is looking at this affordability issue. Now, Republicans are leading, but by less than the margin that Trump won with in Arizona. And the GOP is doing well on every issue except affordability and cost of living. But voters are saying that is by far their top issue. They are concerned with affordability and cost of living in Arizona specifically. So the sort of message, the top line for Republicans and strategists and consultants advising Republican candidates is talk more about affordability. If you can get that to become the pet issue of the Republicans in Arizona, that could be a path forward. But right now, Democrats have that issue in the bag, where Republicans have a lot of others, where there's crime or immigration or other economic things like taxes. People trust Republicans more, but specifically on that issue of affordability and cost of living, Dems are doing better on that right now.
Yeah, and no Democrat is doing better on it than Zohran Mamdani, of course, who has won this extraordinary victory in New York City this week on affordability issues. And watching Donald Trump getting asked about Mamdani yesterday, he was kind of more conciliatory than I had been expecting. He was asked if a small part of him, Donald Trump, wanted this guy to be there and because it would be politically helpful. And Trump was like, well, I love New York and I want it to do well. And I think that is a heartfelt thing for this president, right? This is a city he does actually care about. It's obviously very, very close to his heart. And part of it was sort of like, Mamdani should give me a call and we should try and work things out. And you could almost imagine him quite enjoying getting on with Mamdani in a way.
He also said to Bret Baier that, he better be nice to me. Basically,
Right.
he better be nice to me. Like it's picking a fight with me would be a dangerous thing for him.
It's hard to see Mamdani playing the foreign leaders game where they all come over and do that. I can't imagine him doing
He's
the
not going to be
Oval
sitting
Office
in the
spray,
oval, giving
giving
gifts.
gifts
Yeah.
and saying how great you are, Mr. President. And Trump's rather got used to that, hasn't he? And you talk about, by the way, how much of his time he's spending very visibly on foreign trips and foreign leaders. He's got all these guys coming tonight. We have another foreign leader coming to the White House on Friday. We have another one coming on Monday. All of these things are going to be very visual. And the message that Republicans are going to be taking away as they're struggling with prices once again is, look, here's the president, dealing with world affairs in terms of optics and how it comes across to this important part of his voter base. I'm not sure Republicans are going to be too happy.
It's one of the challenges that they've created for themselves by this flood the zone approach, actually, because they are doing so much. And by they, I mean the White House, the administration, and the president. They're doing so much at the same time, all the time, that they don't end up being able to really focus in on any single issue, when sometimes, like folks in Congress or candidates are like, we need you to hammer this thing, but they're at the same time juggling, a million other headline making uh, moves at once.
Let's talk about the shutdown, Dasha, because Trump spent a fair amount of time talking about that yesterday as well. And
Yes.
we're on to day 37 now, that we're in totally unprecedented territory. No one still knows how long this is going to go on for. We're clearly not going to get a deal this week now. There had been some hope, and we talked about it enough on this podcast, that after last Saturday, after last Tuesday in the elections, things would start to move. They're certainly moving in some corners of the Senate, but they're not moving in others. And some Dems are saying now's the time to dig in, because look, we're actually winning this fight. Why would we cave now? And the other side, you can see the Republicans amping up the pressure, right? You heard from Sean Duffy yesterday talking about the impact on airports, and that's going to be a massive thing if flights start to go wrong.
Yeah, there are a lot of head and hands around the country, including my best friend who is getting married this weekend, and she's freaking out because airports not being functional are
Mm.
her problem. I mean, this has real potency as a factor for Americans. But you're right. This big sweep for Democrats could potentially extend things. The filibuster that the president is pushing, though, I mean, this is the one area where the Congress that has said, like, yes sir to just about everything that Trump has asked of them. This is one where they are drawing a red line. Everything that I'm hearing out of the Hill is there's just no way that they could ever or would ever even like try to get the votes for this to happen. I mean, Blair did tell me that at this breakfast the president had yesterday with GOP senators, that he moved the needle with potentially a few of them. But it's just really hard to see Leader Thune in particular saying, "Yeah, let's go for this."
I was watching him speak yesterday, Thune, and he said literally the practical reality is there are not the votes in the Senate. It's not even close. He is telling President Trump, even if I try to do this for you, we are not going to win this. We cannot convince enough Republican senators to do this thing, because they are so worried about what that means long term for their party in Congress that they just do not want to go there.
Yeah, and Trump does understand that to a point. I mean, he said in that Brett Baer interview, I don't sometimes, you love someone and they do something you really don't like, and that doesn't mean you blow up the relationship. So I can't like hate him for it basically, but he's still gonna keep pushing.
I just want to mention this briefly. Something that's not happening in America today, happening in Brazil today, is the
Yes.
COP30 UN Climate Summit. Now, if you're living in a different country to America, this is a massive deal, right? Everyone's talking about this. Lots of countries are sending their leaders. They're all talking about how can we like try and move on with the Paris climate goals. There is a general global movement. This is a big date in the calendar for lots and lots of countries. The red ring around it. And here, nobody talks about it. The president is obviously not going, but the president is not sending any high-level officials even at all. And we've heard him on this. He told the UN what he thinks about the climate change and all the rest of it. But it's striking to me how much this is just not on anybody's agenda here at all, and how very, very, very like domestically focused the conversation here is completely, even though this is something that 90% of climate scientists will tell you is the existential like threat we're all facing. It's just not in the conversation in DC at all at the moment.
It's not just not in the conversation, it is has been actively wiped out of like any nook or cranny of the administration. Like anything that was climate related, and any agency is gone, and or has been transitioned to a focus on nuclear, on oil and gas, and even coal.
Yeah, absolutely. And tonight on rare earth minerals, obviously not a source of energy, but nevertheless, like that is that is the sort of
That's the
big
focus. Yeah.
global issue that
Mhm.
Donald Trump wants to focus on tonight, not that. Before we go, Dasha, I have to tell you what I did last night because
What did you do?
I actually got out of the house for once.
Oh my gosh! Wow,
Okay,
Jack out on the town.
can you believe it? They had a special screening of the movie that you recommended for me to see, House of Dynamite. Was playing in DC last night, and they brought down the director Catherine Bigelow, the screenwriter Noah Oppenheim, and other people involved in the film as well. Came en masse down to DC for a special screening for the great and the good and me to show the movie, which, as you said, is an anxiety-inducing end of the world movie. Which, like, you sort of come away going, like, well, now I know how the world's going to end. Like, this is what it looks like.
Yep. You see why I was so shook when we were talking about nuclear stuff.
I totally see why you're so shook, and amazing that Donald Trump put this back into the public conversation the way he did at this moment this movie's come out. But it was really interesting to see those guys come out, and they essentially came to DC to defend it because the Pentagon has gone after them on this movie. They're saying that the missile defense system that is portrayed in the movie America's, which, spoiler, doesn't work. They're like, no, this is nonsense. We're all completely safe. Anyway, the Catherine Bigelow came down with her experts and her advice, and she was like, "I'm really sorry, but like we're pretty sure this is absolutely nailed on." And it was just interesting to see them coming to DC
That's
and
amazing.
fighting back.
Yeah, hitting a bullet with a bullet is the description of the difficulty of getting that those missile interceptors to actually do the job. But look at Jack taking a movie recommendation from me.
Right, exactly. I mean, I'm not sure I will again. I don't get a lot of sleep in my job at the best of times.
Sorry.
I did not get a lot of sleep last night. I can tell you that.
Not a comforting plot.
Indeed. We better leave it there. Dasha, thank you so much for joining. It's all we got time for today. We have much more news and analysis, as you know, in today's Playbook newsletter, which you can find at politico.com/playbook.
And I know I gave you guys a little bit of a preview of my interview with James Blair today, but there is so much more in the conversation that drops on Friday morning.
All right. Make sure you listen. And we'll be back tomorrow. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.